Hawking, 1.5%, A Brief History of Time. Now, to be really confessional here, I bought both of those books also. And I tried to read them. And I never finished either one of them either. So I know what I'm looking for when I look at people's bedside tables. And I'm trying to think, why did I buy those books? Well, I think I bought the Rushdie book because I felt really sorry that people were trying to kill him, and that it was almost a political act to buy his book rather than a literary act on my part. And in Stephen Hawking's case, here's this man who we wonder why he's still alive after all these years, who when he writes with his tongue or with some kind of device attached to him. Nothing in his body functions except his brain. I said, I've got to support Stephen Hawking. It's a good thing to do. So I bought both of those books, and I am among the group that never came close to finishing either one of them. Now, on the other end of the readometer, we had Stephen King's It. 99.5% of the people who bought Stephen King's It, and that was a fat Stephen King book, 99.5% of the people who bought it finished it. Another one was Danielle Steele's Daddy, 98.5%, and a book by a guy named Robert Fulghum, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, was the name of the book. I'm not sure if that title is a commentary on my discussion today. I hope not. But I'm not saying that either of King, Steele's, or Fulgham's books are great books. I don't know. I haven't read them. I am saying I want to know something about the people who did read them, because that might, as a student of American culture, that might tell me something about people that I would really like to know. And another thing I think that goes on with reading, if you looked at what are the most popular novels in our history, I have the most popular novel in our history right here, Jacqueline Suzanne, Valley of the Dolls. You'd think it would not be still the most popular. It came out in 1966. It's a long time ago. It's still the best-selling novel in all of American history, with about 35 million copies sold in the United States and about another 35 million sold out of the country, translated into virtually every language that there is. And you could say, well, I think maybe people bought this book because it's full of sex and violence. Well, first of all, there's no violence at all. So you can check that off. Now, as for the sex, there's a little bit of it that takes place in the beginning of the book. You have 3 young women who come to New York City seeking glamorous lives and glamorous careers. They all came from small towns. They had boyfriends in their small towns. The boyfriends wanted to marry them, bigger and better, and they left their boyfriends, went to New York, and became very popular figures. And I say in this early part of the book, it's all about their success, both romantically and professionally. But and so a lot of people saw this book as, wow, this is a real liberated book. This is the beginning of feminism somewhere, the modern feminist movement. However, by the end of the book, all 3 women have been completely destroyed. So what's the message here? The message is, you should have married the boy next door. You shouldn't have been so ambitious for both an exciting professional and personal life. Imagining the average reader of Valley of the Dolls. Let's say she and her husband own a farm in Iowa. I picked Iowa because it is that state which has the most family farms instead of agribusiness, but small family farms. And supposing they have such a farm. And every night, whoa, every night they get into bed, and he goes to sleep, and she reads Valley of the Dolls. And he's snoring away, and he smells a little bit like roast beef, but that's okay, because she's got Valley of the Dolls. And through the first half or so of the book, she's thinking, I should have been one of those women who went to the big city and met Mr. Right and had a romantic life and career and all that kind of thing. But by the end of the book, she says, thank God I did not go to New York City and pursue those things. And just before, as she ends the book, just before turning out the light, she reaches over and kisses her husband on the shoulder and has a big smile on her face and goes to sleep. And this is how I'm imagining the average reader. So again, though this book was trumpeted as a feminist book or a liberated book, it's not liberated at all. It's exactly the opposite. And one other thing, she's speaking out of both sides of her mouth. She gives you one message. The first message excites you, titillates you. The second message reassures you. And I'm thinking this is very typical. Why is this the best-selling novel in history in the United States and perhaps anywhere? And what I've tried to say is precisely its double message. This is a book about Puritanism, really. I've always felt the wrong English people came to the United States to settle the place. If they'd only waited a little while, we might have had some more interesting English people come over after the monarchy had been restored. But the Puritans came over, and I'm here to tell you, they're still there. They are still there. I remember when I went to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, there was a kind of an obsession with the Puritans. I've always wondered why. First of all, the Spaniards were in what's now the United States before the English were. So were the French. Why this obsession with the Puritans? Because I think in many ways we are still that country that the Puritans had a good deal to do with founding. I want to mention one other writer who, until Stephen King came along, was the #1 male writer in the United States, and that's Mickey Spillane. Have any of you ever read any Mickey Spillane? Man. I do not recommend that you read Mickey Spillane. I reread this the other day and was terribly ashamed of myself, because these were the hot books, if you will, of my adolescence. And this edition cost 50 25 cents, and it always said across the top, a slaughter for a quarter. And my friends and I, we read these novels like this one called The Big Kill. And we thought they were very sexy novels. In fact, you could look at this part of the book and you could see a kind of black marks on those were the pages where my friends and I did a lot of sweating, I think, where you could tell where these parts of the book were. But when you actually look at Mickey Spillane's novels, every last one of them, they're not about sex at all. They're about lust. And they're about lust that is always, but always unfulfilled. Is because very early in the book, we meet this very sexy woman, or rather, Mike Hammer, who is Mickey Spillane's detective, private eye, as we say, meets, in this case, Marcia. He goes up to her apartment, rings the bell, and she appears with essentially nothing on. And she is as seductive as anyone could possibly be. And he says, later, baby, I got work to do. His work is always killing people. And all through the book, he's shooting bad guys. But he's trying to find out who is Mr. Big, who is the one who is in charge of whatever this criminal operation is. And I hope you can see where this is going, because in the very last pages he finds out it's not Mr. Big, it's Ms. Big. It's the very Marsha who has been trying to seduce him from page 1, because she makes many other appearances. At the end of the book, she generally starts taking off her clothes in a very last effort to seduce him, and he takes out his .45 and he says, I gave her a couple of extra navels. And she says, how could you? And he says, it was easy. So there was never any sexual consummation in Mickey Spillane books. Mostly because it turns out that the one who is trying to seduce him, he kills her at the end of the book. So I was discussing this with a class one time. A student raised his hand and he said, Professor Rockland, it concerned a different book where there were 2 women. And at the end of that, and they're both trying to seduce our hero. And at the end of the book, I thought, wow, things are changing. Something's really going to happen. I'm so excited. Something's really going to happen. And he's just